Trump's legal team members, Will Scharf with me, to go through some of the biggest stories in the news, including an update on what's going on with former President Donald Trump. Will, thank you so much for joining me again.
Yes, so great to be back with you. I've had a great time the last couple times we've recorded, so it's good to be back.
Well, I know that you and your team behind the scenes are doing everything you can with these crazy trumped up lawsuits against Donald Trump. In some cases, they're being funded by people that openly hate Donald Trump. And you guys have done just an incredible job covering those. Something that I wanted to better understand for myself and my audience is why did Judge Juan Merchan delay former President Donald Trump's sentencing? Many were worried that he was going to be sentenced to jail or home arrest or something that would keep him off the campaign trail. I'm just trying to understand, was there political pressure? Is this to do with the Supreme Court? Maybe a mix? What are your thoughts?
So sentencing in that New York case was originally scheduled for July 11th, just a couple days before the Republican National Convention. We moved to delay that after the Supreme Court's decision on presidential immunity, which came down on July 1st. Now, the Supreme Court's decision on presidential immunity, it separates out official conduct from unofficial conduct. For official conduct, a president, in certain categories of official conduct, a president has immunity. For private conduct, he doesn't. The New York case relates to private conduct, but a lot of the evidence used in that case related to President Trump's official conduct in office as president. That evidence, under the Supreme Court's reasoning, under its opinion, should never have been allowed in at trial. So our argument is essentially that the trial verdict has to be thrown out on that basis. Judge Merchan is clearly worried about that. The New York DA's office is clearly worried about that. So sentencing was pushed off first to September. It was going to be on September 18th. And then just a week or two ago, Judge Merchan pushed things off even further to after the election. The situation that had been created by his scheduling this sentencing for mid-September was that we currently have a motion in front of him on this presidential immunity issue. We have a right to appeal any decision he makes on that presidential immunity issue before he can take any further action. But the schedule was so tight that we would have been racing up the courts, potentially all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court in just 36 hours. And I think even though Judge Merchan has been very unfair to us throughout this case, he realized that this situation was just absurd, that he couldn't ask us to do that, that wasn't fair, that he was creating all kinds of other issues for himself down the road. So he quite reasonably delayed things until after the election, and we're very happy about that. But again, that entire trial verdict should be thrown out. They used evidence that they have had no right to use, and we're going to keep fighting to vindicate President Trump's rights and to make sure that that unjust verdict doesn't stand.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I couldn't find this video. I don't know if it's been taken down or what, but there was somebody who works closely with District Attorney Alvin Bragg, and he's out on a date. It's basically like a sting operation. They filmed the whole thing. He talks about how these charges against Trump are fake, that District Attorney Alvin Bragg is using them to get ahead with his future political career and moving up the corporate ladder within government law. He then comes out and says, I didn't mean any of that. I was trying to impress a girl that I was hoping to take home. I don't know if you saw that video. Yeah. Do you think there's any truth to that, that maybe DA Alvin Bragg is using this as a way to further his career?
Yeah, in vino veritas, as they say. So the video that you're referring to, this is a guy who's the head of public affairs for the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York. The Southern District of New York is considered by many to be the preeminent federal prosecutor's office in the country. So this is a very, very serious guy who understands both the law and New York and the New York courts intimately. He's a fellow who's been there for, I think, decades now. Very, very serious guy. As you said, he's out on a date, and his putative date or purported date asks him about all of these cases against President Trump. And what he says consistently is that none of these cases would have been brought but for the political dynamic, except for the fact that all of these Democrat actors want to interfere with the 2024 election. None of these cases would have been brought. And he's quite vicious about Alvin Bragg, about Bragg's motivations, about Attorney General Letitia James, who launched this absolutely insane consumer protection lawsuit against President Trump that actually resulted in a $500 million verdict. We have that case up on appeal next week, actually. But this guy's just absolutely vicious and really lays it out. And again, this is not a Republican. This is not a Trump person. This is not someone from our team. This is a guy who you would expect to be, if anything, on the other side here. And yet he really just lays out how all of these cases are politically motivated. All of these cases aren't about the law, aren't about fairness. They're just about getting Trump. And speaking as a former federal prosecutor, we were trained that the powers of prosecution are just so vast. You can't use it for political purposes. You do that, it's the end of the republic. We were always trained that our cases should never be political. They should never even appear political. What we have at work with these Trump cases is the exact opposite, that they're blatantly political. There's no motivation for them other than naked political power. And that's just wrong. It's banana republic stuff.
Yeah. Okay. The left-leaning mainstream media has given this story almost zero coverage. Some of the right-leaning mainstream media has, but among conservative independent journalists, there's this story going around about Juan Merchan's daughter raising nearly $100 million for Democrats, tens of millions during this case. They're literally using she and her company are using this story of her dad being the judge to get big bad Trump and raising money. Is there no conflict of interest? The fact that this family member is enriching herself and her company for Democrats opposed to Donald Trump while this court case is being tried?
Yeah, well, we think there's a clear and blatant conflict of interest, and we've asked Judge Merchan to recuse himself off this case numerous times now on that exact basis. The issue is that his daughter, Lauren Merchan, runs a company called Authentic Campaigns. Authentic is one of the leading Democrat digital fundraising firms in the country. As you said, they raise literally hundreds of millions of dollars for leading Democrats, including key Trump opponents, like, for example, Adam Schiff. They've been raising money off of Trump's legal problems while their principal, while Lauren Merchan's father, is directly involved in some of those cases. Even more damning, there has been at least one direct payment from Kamala Harris's campaign to Authentic Campaigns, to Lauren Merchan's firm. Now, the constitutional standard for recusal, the seminal Supreme Court cases, Caperton v. Massey, the constitutional standard for recusal is that even the appearance of impropriety can require recusal of a judge for reasons of due process, given sufficiently extreme facts. I've never seen facts more extreme than this. I mean, the appearance of impropriety, if not actual impropriety here, having Judge Merchan sit in judgment over President Trump while his daughter fundraises on the back of exactly what's going on, it's crazy, and it shouldn't be allowed to go on. As I said, we've challenged Judge Merchan on this issue. We've asked him to recuse. If this case were to make it up on direct appeal, that failure to recuse would be a ground that we would continue to challenge. But as you said, the mainstream media has just looked the other way. They don't want to talk about this. I mean, we have direct payments from Kamala Harris's campaign to the daughter of the judge sitting in judgment over President Trump. It's absolutely absurd.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I knew about Adam Schiff. I knew about some people in New York and New Jersey. I did not realize that Kamala Harris's team was also involved in that. That's just absolute insanity. I know that you're mostly focused on the New York stuff, but I wanted to get your insight. Down in Georgia, Judge Scott Macafee has removed several criminal charges against Donald Trump filed by District Attorney Fani Willis. He's now saying she doesn't even have the authority or the federal authority to bring such charges. Can you help me and my audience better understand that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this Georgia case, it's a supposed Rico prosecution. They tried to make President Trump out to be like a mobster, but it's a Rico prosecution relating to President Trump's efforts, he and his allies' efforts to investigate election fraud in the aftermath of the 2020 election. Now, your listeners may remember we moved to disqualify Fani Willis off of this case because of these insane conflicts of interests that she had with her boyfriend / special prosecutor Nathan Wade. That issue is currently up before the Georgia Court of Appeals. We believe that Fani Willis will be disqualified off of this case. And I think any fair prosecutor who would take this case over would dismiss it in its entirety because it should have never been brought. So we'll have word on that likely by October, November, maybe into December. And I don't think this Georgia case is going anywhere, in other words. That having been said, as you just indicated, Judge Macafee keeps dismissing charges. That as we really get into this indictment, as we look at what the actual charged offenses are, and as our team challenges aspects of the indictment, Judge Macafee keeps knocking off charges, saying that, you know, in this case, that Fani Willis didn't have the right to bring certain counts of the indictment. In other instances, that there just wasn't sufficient evidence alleged to support the charged conduct. What I think the key thing about all that is, though, the key takeaway is that this is a very sloppy case, that Fani Willis and her team rushed into court with this massive indictment. They gobbled up all the press in the world. This was breathlessly covered by the mainstream media. They talked about how this Georgia case was going to be the case that finally brought down President Trump. It was all garbage from the start. This was a sloppy indictment. It wasn't well-founded in fact or law. It should have never been brought in the first place. But Fani Willis got what she wanted. She got all of this press. They tarred President Trump with, you know, this idea that there was this Rico indictment against him, and it was covered for weeks and weeks and weeks. This case is absolute garbage. I think it will be dismissed in its entirety before too long. And it's absolutely outrageous that President Trump has had to deal with it for as long as he has now.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. One thing I wanted to get your thoughts on, you mentioned that she's up on, I guess, an investigation just within the last couple of weeks. I don't know if you saw this video or not, but the daughter is arrested. Fani Willis's daughter is arrested for essentially reckless driving. And instead of just dealing with it like a driver, she calls in mommy. Yeah. And Fani Willis shows up. Who does she show up with? She shows up with Nathan Wade. And it's on the dash cam video of them being together. Yet she swore under oath that they weren't in a relationship. They weren't even really friends anymore. She didn't give him all of this money. She didn't give him special benefits that paid him over $700,000 of taxpayer money. Will that video be used to show that there is indeed a friendship or at least some kind of a relationship and that she maybe lied under oath? Hey, Will, let me interrupt just for a second. I got to tell people about today's video sponsor. How many of you are concerned that your privacy is being attacked by the radical left? We already know what they did at Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. The deep state, including the DOJ, is invading individuals' private messages and targeting them based off their political affiliation. That's why I've partnered with Freedom Chat, a private social messaging app that, like me, believes in privacy as a fundamental human right. Freedom Chat offers true end-to-end encryption, built-in screenshot protection to ensure that no one can screenshot your conversations, no storage of messages on their server, and no commercial use of user data. This is the app that I trust, and it's the app my family and I rely on, especially as we approach the election. Some people will stop at nothing to maintain power and make privacy protection more important than ever. Download the app right now by going to freedomchat.com/Gardner or shoot the QR code and go and check that out. Now, I'm such a fan, I've created my own private channel. You'll see when you download the app, you can look for Stephen Gardner and you can see what I go on and talk about. Go check them out right now. All right, Will, let's get back to answering that question.
Yeah, I thought that video was pretty hilarious. When I first saw it, I didn't realize Nathan Wade was going to make an appearance. And then as I watched it, he sort of pops up. I'm like, wait a second, that's not supposed to be happening anymore. She said that they were done. I mean, Fani Willis perjured herself so many times when she was on the stand, when she was trying to explain the money that had flowed to Nathan Wade and then the benefits that she'd received from that. And she committed perjury probably dozens of times over. I think this is just a reminder of how dishonest she was when she was on the stand and really throughout this prosecution. I hope that eventually she is held accountable because I think she has flagrantly violated the law in a way that's just unacceptable, not just for a public servant, but for any person who's called on to appear in court. I also think it's worth, her daughter gets pulled over and her first thought is, I deserve special privileges. I deserve to be treated differently because my mother's Fani Willis. I mean, that just sort of, it shows that there's a degree of, I don't know, corruption, or these people just view the law in a very backwards way. I mean, this sort of don't you know who I am mentality, sort of sense of entitlement. I think it flows through in the way that we saw Fani Willis and Nathan Wade behave, that Fani Willis is about to hire a special prosecutor to take on this Trump thing. It's a potentially very lucrative engagement. She doesn't go out and hire the best lawyer. She hires her boyfriend, this, basically billboard personal injury attorney, ends up paying him over $1 million, receives all kinds of benefits through her relationship with him. I mean, it's fundamentally corrupt. It speaks to a deep-seated culture of corruption that seems to have permeated even her family.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, I want to switch gears just on conservative Republican topics that I find disturbing. A new survey data came out from Napolitan New Services where 30% of Democrats surveyed said they wished the Trump assassination attempt had actually happened. To me, this is gross. But I think it also proves that all of the vile rhetoric spewed by Democrats and Democrat-infiltrated mainstream media is affecting the life of former President Donald Trump. He's in constant danger. Just like 30% of these people wish that he had actually died. What are your thoughts on the media and their behavior towards him? And then your thoughts on these Democrats wishing this man were dead?
So when you have over a period of 8 years or a decade, this constant drumbeat from the left, from figures like Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, now the official office of the White House, I mean, Karen Jean-Pierre the other day, when they are saying constantly that Trump is the next Hitler, that Trump is a threat to America, a threat to American democracy. When you say those sorts of things repeatedly and constantly over and over and over again, it does start to have an effect. I mean, I don't think any American in their right mind should ever be in a position to cheer for the political assassination of any American politician. I mean, the idea that that's something that any of us should applaud or that any of us should be okay with, regardless of political stripe or ideology or anything like that, it's sickening. But they have so poisoned the well, the mainstream media and major Democrat politicians, they've so poisoned the well against President Trump with their most hardcore followers that I think these people actually believe that President Trump is the next Hitler or a threat to democracy or any of this sort of parade of horribles, as opposed to just a guy who may disagree with them. I hope that at some point we can get back to a place in American politics where we disagree with each other, but also understand that, for America to succeed, we're all in this together and we all need to be rowing in the same direction. The left has such, we call it Trump derangement syndrome, but it has this visceral hatred for President Trump in a way that I've never seen before in my lifetime. And now it's threatening President Trump's life. I mean, we've seen 2 assassination attempts against the presidential candidate in the last couple months. The last time there was a serious attempt on a president or a presidential candidate, I mean, you really do have to go back to Ronald Reagan to find something nearly as severe. And President Trump's had that twice in 2 months now. This has to stop. if it continues, if this rhetoric and this political violence continues the way that it is, I think it could be the end of the republic. I hate to say. So I hope that folks on the left are chastened. It doesn't seem that they are. But yeah, I saw those poll numbers as well, and to me, it's just it's absolutely terrifying. I, for one, I'm thankful. I'm thankful to God that President Trump is okay. I see the hand of God, and in these two attempts not being successful when they very easily could have been. And I'm just hopeful we can make it through this election cycle, and then hopefully tamping down some of the most wild rhetoric we've been seeing, particularly out of the left.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. More just things that are disturbing to me in the news today. 158 Democrats in the House of Representatives just voted against deporting illegal immigrants that assault women. Are Democrats so worried about losing future voters that they're willing to sacrifice these, these women that are being abused around the country? To me, this makes no sense, because one of the drums that they beat over and over again is that they are the party that protects women. Why would 158 nationally recognized House of Representatives vote that illegal immigrants can't be deported after abusing women? It's gross to me.
Yeah, I think much of the left's ideology today works on the basis of this sort of DEI hierarchy of grievances. That everyone is split into an interest group, and individuals don't really have rights. It's groups have rights. And there's no group that is more favored by the left today than illegal immigrants. It doesn't make any sense from a policy perspective, from a political perspective. It doesn't make any sense. But Democrat politicians are reflexively in favor of anything that gives illegal immigrants a pass for anything. That's why we have this absurd situation where you have illegal immigrants who re-enter the country over and over and over again, who commit at times heinous offenses, and yet they're not locked up, they're not deported, nothing really happens to them. The situation we're seeing in so many of our cities that are just being absolutely overrun by tens of thousands of illegal immigrants, who bring along with them, cartels and crime and drugs and human trafficking and all of these terrible social ills. The left won't say a peep, because in their worldview, the people who have the most rights, the people who are most deserving of government benefits, of government consideration, is illegal immigrants. There's no logic to it. I can't explain it beyond that, but that's really the way that folks on the left think. Illegal immigrants are good, therefore don't be mean to illegal immigrants, even if they're doing all of this terrible stuff. I think one of the important things to remember is that much of the rhetoric, much of sort of the political dynamic around the illegal immigrant issue was formed in the 1990s, when you were talking about maybe a couple 100,000 illegal immigrants a year, a lot of people from Mexico coming over to do farm work. It was a very different dynamic than we have today, where we've had 15 million, potentially 20 million illegal entrants just since the start of the Biden administration, and people of a very different demographic character, socioeconomic character than the sorts of illegal immigrants we saw just a generation ago. I think this is a massive threat to Main Street America, just the sheer numbers of people coming across the border. There's a real terrorism concern with many of these folks from the Middle East who are coming across the border now. There's a real foreign policy and defense concern because you have a lot of military-aged men from China coming across the border. I think that just in every which way, this border issue, this illegal immigration issue, is one of the most important issues facing America today. And the left's unwillingness to engage at all, even when it's as stark an issue as illegal immigrants raping women, illegal immigrants abusing women, it just shows that the left they're unserious from a policy perspective. And I think their worldview is just fundamentally broken.
Yeah. Let me play a clip with you, because this shows, it proves the depths to which they are willing to hide crimes in order to get future voters in. this less than 2-minute clip. This is the former border chief, Aaron Heitke. He says that he was ordered to hide illegal aliens from the media and cover up the border disaster. Specifically, he was not allowed to cover special interest aliens known as suspected terrorists. Let me roll this.
In San Diego, we had an exponential increase in significant interest aliens. These are aliens with significant ties to terrorism. Prior to this administration, the San Diego sector averaged 10 to 15 SIA arrests per year. Once word was out the border was far easier to cross, San Diego went to over 100 SIAs in 2022, well over that in 2023, and even more than that registered this year. These are only the ones we caught. At the time, I was told I could not release any information on this increase in SIAs or mention any of the arrests. The administration was trying to convince the public there was no threat at the border.
Okay, so the Biden administration is directly ordering Border Patrol to bury these crimes and this information. We're almost done here.
Fentanyl is another issue. The San Diego area sees between 80 and 90% of the methamphetamine and fentanyl seizures annually for our entire country. With little enforcement at the border, these drugs were coming through en masse. During my last year in San Diego, the price for a single pill of fentanyl, for example, went from $10 to 25 cents. To make matters worse, during 2022 and 23, I had to shut down San Diego traffic checkpoints, which are critical for drug interdiction, because the resources had been diverted to the process and release mission. The large numbers also had and still have a negative impact on the San Diego community. I had to release illegal aliens by the hundreds each day into communities who could not support them. To quiet the problem, 2 flights a week were provided from San Diego to Texas. These flights simply brought aliens that would have been released in San Diego over to Texas. Each flight cost approximately $150,000. This was the administration's way to try and quiet the border-wide crisis.
Okay, so covering up the trafficking, covering up the terrorists, covering up the fentanyl, and covering up these $150,000 flights to get people out of San Diego over to a red state. What are your thoughts on all of this Biden administration cover up?
Yeah, the Biden administration is desperate to avoid accountability for what it has done at the border. Under President Trump, the border was relatively secured. I mean, there were still illegal immigrants coming in, but it was an order of magnitude or 2 less than what we're seeing today. The Biden administration threw out the Trump administration's most successful policies at the border, and then saw the border flooded the way that we've seen. And with it, you know, that wave brings crime, brings human trafficking, brings fentanyl, brings all of these issues. And in their haste to sort of cover up the situation that they'd created, get these people out of the border zone as quickly as possible so that they're not in these kind of detainee camps at the border, so that they're not just overloading the customs offices in that location. They've created a national problem, a profound national problem that there isn't an easy solution for other than detain and deport, as President Trump has proposed. I want to speak about the fentanyl issue, though, just a bit, because it's one that's personal for me. You know, I was a federal prosecutor here in St. Louis. I prosecuted dozens of cases involving fentanyl. Every year, over 100,000 Americans are dying of overdoses that are directly attributable to China and the Mexican cartels trafficking drugs across the southern border. 100,000 Americans a year are dying because of this problem. When we're talking about not securing the border, the illegal immigration issue is a massive issue. It's one of the most important issues facing America. But when we're talking about not securing the border, we're also signing on to a policy that has allowed our enemies to kill 100,000 Americans a year or more. We launched a war in Afghanistan, over 5,000 deaths on 9/11. In the entirety of the Vietnam War, 50,000 Americans were killed. We're losing 100,000 Americans a year to drug overdoses. I believe because the Biden administration, because the folks in Washington, D.C., because our political leadership doesn't have the political will to shut it down, to go after the cartels, to secure the border, to hold China accountable. And to me, it's beyond the pale. It's something that should outrage all Americans.
Yeah, I mean, if you add up how many have died by the time Biden gets out of office. That's how many we lost in World War II fighting Hitler. I mean, it's just a massive number of people that, you know, the families connected to that. Now you're talking millions of people affected by this and hundreds of thousands of deaths that could have been avoided. I mean, this is just like lost opportunity. It's incredibly sad. I know we're up against time. I wanted to get your thoughts on one last thing. This data came out just last night, Will. 60% of Teamsters say they plan to vote for President Trump. 70% of steam fitters say they plan to vote for Donald Trump. 70% of UAW, United Auto Worker members, plan to vote for Donald Trump. Hardworking Americans want to vote for them. Now these unions are saying, we're not going to endorse anybody this year. All right. So the leaders at the top of this are like, oh, crap. We're just going to sit on the sidelines. But the data coming in is that the hardworking Americans overwhelmingly support Donald Trump. What are your thoughts on that final story?
Yeah, if you're a United Auto Worker member, if you're working at an auto plant up in Michigan, and you see that Joe Biden's plan is to convert every American car to an electric vehicle in the next 20 years, which would put you out of work, why would you support Kamala Harris, his successor? If you're a Teamster and you understand that the Biden-Harris administration's plan is allowing tens of millions of people to jump across the border, lowering wages for everybody in hardworking jobs across America, like, why would you sign on to that? What's basically happened here is that the Democrat Party for generations has taken union support for granted. And the policies of the Democrat Party have shifted further and further and further away from policies that would actually benefit working class people all over the country towards policies that are actively antagonistic to the interests of hardworking union members around the country. So when you look at the Teamsters, when you look at the auto workers, when you look at all of these skilled trades who have seen the industries that they rely on gutted by bad policy out of Washington, D.C., you understand why their membership want to go back to the way things were under Trump, where you had the onshoring of manufacturing, where you had incredible capital investment in this country that led to a resurgence in manufacturing jobs, in skilled labor jobs. I mean, those are the sorts of policies that would actually benefit union membership in America. And I think these guys, the guys on the ground, intuitively understand that. But the leadership in Washington, D.C., their interests aren't aligned with those of their members. They want to keep getting invited to the fancy parties. They want to be part of this sort of weird Democrat ruling elite in Washington, D.C., and that's why they're not willing to bow to the reality of the situation and endorse along with their members' interests and get behind President Trump. Yeah.
One of the former CIA guests that I have come on, he always asks the question, cui bono, who benefits, right? And I think the American workers are realizing if we vote in Trump, we benefit. And the heads of the union are thinking if we vote in Kamala Harris, we get cheap labor, we can replace these expensive American workers with out-of-country people. Who benefits? The heads of these unions, right? So, you know, just with that in mind, and you follow the money, it's like, no, the American people want to make good wages, be able to provide for their family, put food on the table, a roof over their head, maybe a vacation each year. And these labor union, they just want cheap labor. They want to lower the 401k contributions. They want to lower the healthcare costs, get in cheaper salaried, cheaper hourly people. I think that's what we're saying play out. Will, I know you're very busy. It took us a while to get this interview scheduled, so I appreciate you coming on. If people want to follow you online, learn more about what you're doing, where can I point them?
You can find me on social media, on X, Facebook, Instagram, Truth Social, just at Will Scharf, WILLSCHARF. And I just like to say, I always really enjoy our chats. Thanks so much for having me back on, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. Hey, thank you again. I hope you have